Two strangers in fake police uniforms stood in front of the house, their smug faces revealing a sense of entitlement. Claiming to inspect violations, they began spraying paint on my driveway. No reason, no authority. When I stepped in, they didn't expect their target to fight back. What happened next shocked even the toughest people. But let's start from the beginning. It all began when I first noticed them. Two men, standing in front of my house, dressed in poorly made knockoff police uniforms with HOA slapped across their chests. They looked like they'd raided a costume shop, and yet, there they were, acting like they owned the place. My neighborhood had its flaws, sure, but it was mine. And no HOA goons were going to waltz in here without a legitimate reason. The man in charge was a burly guy named Craig. He had the kind of smug smile that made your skin crawl. His uniform, clearly a few sizes too small, only added to his overinflated sense of authority. Without warning, he began listing violations on my property, his voice dripping with condescension. My lawn was too high, he said, even though it was barely a few inches above the usual. And my mailbox? Apparently it was improperly placed, though I'd had it there for years without issue. At first I tried to stay calm, but with each word that came out of Craig's mouth, the anger inside me grew. He was making up nonsense, probably just to stir trouble. What gave him the right to inspect my property like this? The more he spoke, the more I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about power. They weren't here to enforce anything. They were here to intimidate. I watched Craig, his eyes gleaming with self-righteousness as he marked his little notes. He was so convinced he could get away with anything, assuming I'd just back down and comply. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. No, this wasn't just some petty squabble over rules. This was about standing up to people who thought they could impose their will, without cause or consequence. And I was ready to show them just how wrong they were. The more they harassed me, the angrier I became. I'd had enough. I was just trying to live my life, in my own home, in my own neighborhood. But these so-called HOA officers were relentless. Every corner of my property was scrutinized, every detail picked apart. My house was clean, well kept, but none of that mattered. They kept inventing reasons to invade my privacy, nitpicking the smallest things, like a misplaced rock or a slightly overgrown bush. They were testing my patience, pushing me to the edge. Then, it happened. I watched, in disbelief, as Craig ordered his partner to pull out a can of spray paint. It was absurd. They were about to mark my driveway, something as insignificant as that, just to prove some pointless point. As if there was an invisible rule that my driveway was somehow wrong. The paint can rattled in his partner's hands, and I could see his nerves. He was fumbling, unsure of what to do next, while Craig just stood there with a smug grin on his face like he was enjoying the power he thought he had. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They had no right to do this, no right to come onto my property, let alone deface it with their nonsense. My blood started to boil as the absurdity of the situation hit me. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. This wasn't just about a lawn or a mailbox anymore. This was about respect, about standing up to people who thought they could play God in my own life. I wasn't going to let these fake officers, these imposters, walk all over me. Not this time. It was time to put an end to their games. Enough was enough. I marched straight up to them, my fists clenched, fury boiling inside me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the air. The audacity of these men was beyond belief. They had no right to be here, no authority, and yet there they stood, with smug expressions on their faces, acting as though they were untouchable. It was infuriating. They laughed, brushing me off like I was an inconvenience. One of them, Craig, the leader, gave me a patronizing look, as if I were just a minor nuisance standing in the way of their little power trip. His partner, a nervous-looking guy with a fake badge that barely clung to his chest, sneered in my direction, trying to hide his own discomfort. But it didn't matter. They thought they could intimidate me, control me. Not anymore. I felt my pulse quicken, the anger driving me forward. I wasn't going to stand by and let them ruin my peace of mind, my home. I pulled out my phone, the camera recording their every move. I got footage of the spray paint can, the way they fumbled with it like amateurs, their ridiculous badges, everything I could capture. It wasn't just a driveway they were threatening. It was my life, my rights. I was done letting these frauds trample over me. I didn't just need to stop them. I needed proof, solid evidence of their scam, their abuse of power. I knew I could fight back. I was no longer powerless. The anger I felt surged through me, turning into determination. This wasn't just about defending my property anymore. It was about showing them that they couldn't get away with this. It was about standing up for what was right, for drawing the line when people like them tried to walk all over you. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I knew the law better than these wannabe enforcers, and I wasn't about to let them walk away unscathed. They thought they could bully their way through my life, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't just fighting for my property anymore. I was fighting for justice. The first step was filing a police report. I made sure to include all the footage I'd taken, the spray paint, the fake badges, everything. I was methodical. Every piece of evidence stacked up to prove that these men weren't just overstepping their bounds. They were committing crimes. I wasn't relying on some vague hope that someone would do the right thing. I was taking matters into my own hands. The response from the police was swift. They took my report seriously, and within hours, officers were at my door, ready to investigate. I watched as they gathered the evidence, talked to neighbors who had witnessed the harassment, and pieced together the truth. It didn't take long for them to realize that Craig and his partner had no business pretending to be officers. They weren't just criminals. They were dangerous, trying to manipulate the law and intimidate innocent people. And when the truth came to light, everything changed. It was like a shift in the air. The smug confidence on Craig's face, the arrogant way he'd walked around like he owned the place. It all melted away the moment the investigation made its way to the truth. These men were in deep trouble, and they knew it. The arrests came soon after. Craig, the thick-set leader, was taken away first, his face red with a mix of anger and humiliation. His partner, the nervous one, stood frozen, his fake badge now a clear sign of his guilt. The police officers were firm, no hesitation as they slapped the handcuffs on. Watching them being led away was a feeling I can't quite explain. It wasn't just relief. It was the sweet taste of justice, the satisfaction of knowing that these frauds who had tried to ruin my life were finally paying the price for their actions. Their smug grins were gone, replaced with regret, confusion, and a deep realization that their little charade was over. They were nothing more than criminals, and the law had caught up with them. The feeling of seeing them escorted out in handcuffs, their power stripped away, was pure victory. They had thought they could push people around without facing consequences, that their fake uniforms would shield them from the truth. They were wrong. The law had finally had its say, and it wasn't on their side.